My parents left me on a porch with a $20 bill and never looked back. 10 years later, they were on their knees, begging me to come home. But they didn't know what I had become, and they didn't know who was watching. The night they drove away, I made a promise. Not to forgive, to remember. My name is Riley. And this is the story of how my parents threw me away like a bag of trash, how my uncle saved me, and how 10 years later my parents came crawling back, begging me to save them. You might think that sounds like a movie, but this is real, this is my life, and it starts on a night I will never forget. I was 15 years old, a sophomore in high school. I had braces on my teeth, a notebook full of bad poetry, and a heart that still believed my parents loved me. That was my first mistake. Believing. My parents, Carol and Derek, were the kind of people who smiled for neighbors but screamed behind closed doors. My dad sold used cars and my mom sold essential oils on Facebook. They were both obsessed with image. Our house had a white fence, a green lawn, and a perfect living room where nobody ever sat. But inside those walls, I was invisible unless I did something wrong. The trouble started when my dad's car dealership started losing money. My mom's essential oil business was a joke. They owed bills, they owed people. And instead of working harder, they looked for a way out. That way out was me. I remember the night exactly. It was October. Cold. The leaves were dying on the trees outside my window, and I remember thinking that was a sign. My parents called me into the kitchen. They had 2 suitcases by the door. My dad was wearing his good jacket. My mom had her hair done. I thought maybe we were going on a trip. A stupid, hopeful thought. My mom spoke first. She always spoke first when she had bad news. She said, "Riley, honey, we need to talk about your future." I sat down at the table. I was wearing an old sweatshirt with a hole in the sleeve. I remember picking at that hole while she talked. She said, "Your father and I have been given an amazing opportunity, a job in another state. But we can't take you with us right now. It's just for a little while. We've arranged for you to stay with your Aunt Margaret." My Aunt Margaret was my mom's sister. I had met her twice. She lived in a small apartment across town. She smelled like cigarettes and didn't like kids. I asked how long a little while was. My dad finally spoke. He said, "We don't know, but you're a strong girl. You'll figure it out." That was the moment. The moment I felt something crack inside my chest. I looked at their faces. My mom wouldn't meet my eyes. My dad was already looking at the door. They weren't sad. They were relieved. I said, "You're not coming back, are you?" My mom's lip trembled for half a second. Then she said, "Don't be dramatic, Riley. This is hard for us too, hard for them. I was the one being left. I was the one with nowhere to go. But sure, hard for them." They drove me to my Aunt Margaret's that same night. My aunt opened the door, looked at me, looked at my parents, and didn't even pretend to be surprised. She just said, "The couch is in the living room. Don't touch my stuff." My parents didn't come inside. My mom gave me a $20 bill and said, "Buy yourself a pizza." My dad patted my head like I was a dog. Then they got in their car and drove away. I stood on the porch watching their taillights disappear. I waited for them to turn around. I waited for them to realize what they had done. They didn't turn around. That was the last time I saw them for 10 years. But here is where my story changes. Here is where I got lucky, because most kids who get abandoned don't have someone to catch them. I did. His name was Uncle Tommy. Uncle Tommy was my dad's younger brother. He was nothing like my dad. My dad was all talk and no heart. Uncle Tommy was quiet and steady. He worked as a mechanic. He lived in a small house on the other side of town. He had a dog named Gus and a garden full of tomatoes. He wasn't married. He didn't have kids. He just lived his life and kept to himself. I hadn't seen Uncle Tommy in years. My dad didn't like him. Said he was a loser. Said he never made anything of himself. But my dad said a lot of things that weren't true. 3 days after my parents left, Uncle Tommy showed up at my Aunt Margaret's door. I don't know how he found out. Maybe my aunt called him. Maybe he heard through the family grapevine. All I know is that one afternoon, there was a knock on the door, and when my aunt opened it, Uncle Tommy was standing there. He looked past my aunt and saw me sitting on the couch. His face changed when he saw me. His eyes got soft. He said, "Riley, come on, you're coming with me." My aunt started to argue. She said she was doing just fine. She said she didn't need his help. Uncle Tommy didn't even look at her. He kept his eyes on me. He said, "Riley, grab your stuff." I didn't have much stuff, a backpack, A few clothes, my notebook. I grabbed it and walked to the door. My aunt huffed and went back to her room. She didn't say goodbye. I didn't expect her to. Uncle Tommy put his hand on my shoulder. His hand was big and calloused and warm. He said, "You're safe now. I've got you." I started to cry. I had been holding it in for 3 days. 3 days of pretending I was fine. 3 days of eating cold soup and sleeping on a smelly couch. But when Uncle Tommy said those words, something broke open in me. I cried so hard I couldn't breathe. And Uncle Tommy just stood there, holding my shoulder, waiting. He didn't tell me to stop. He didn't say it would be okay. He just waited. When I finally stopped, he opened the door of his old truck. Gus the dog was sitting in the front seat. Uncle Tommy said, "Move over, Gus. Riley gets the front." Gus moved. I got in, and Uncle Tommy drove me to his house. His house was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a porch with a rocking chair. The yard was full of tomatoes and sunflowers. Inside, the furniture was old but clean. It smelled like coffee and dog and motor oil. It wasn't fancy, but it was safe. Uncle Tommy showed me to the spare bedroom. It had a twin bed with a blue blanket, a wooden desk, a lamp. He said, "It's not much, but it's yours for as long as you need it." I said, "How long can I stay?" He looked at me. He said, "Forever, if you want." I didn't believe him at first, because my parents had just taught me that forever wasn't real, but Uncle Tommy meant it. He proved it every day. The first few weeks were hard. I had nightmares. I would wake up in the middle of the night, sweating and crying, thinking I was back on my aunt's couch. Every time, Uncle Tommy would be there. He would knock softly on my door and say, "Riley, you okay?" And if I said no, he would come in and sit on the edge of my bed. He wouldn't touch me. He wouldn't crowd me. He would just sit there until my breathing slowed down. One night, I asked him why he came for me. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Because nobody came for me." I didn't understand. I asked him what he meant. He told me a story I had never heard. When Uncle Tommy was 17, his parents kicked him out. My grandparents, they said he was a waste of space, a failure. They threw him out with nothing but the clothes on his back. He slept in his car for 6 months. He worked odd jobs. He ate from dumpsters sometimes. He said, "I know what it feels like to be thrown away, Riley." And I promised myself that if I ever saw a kid in that situation, I would do something. I would be the person I needed when I was young. I cried again. But this time, I wasn't crying for myself. I was crying for Uncle Tommy, for the 17-year-old boy who had nobody, for the man who turned his pain into kindness. After that night, I stopped feeling sorry for myself. I started paying attention. I noticed that Uncle Tommy worked 12-hour days at the garage. I noticed that he came home with grease on his hands and exhaustion in his eyes. I noticed that he still made time to make me dinner, to check my homework, to walk Gus around the block. I started helping. I cleaned the house. I did the laundry. I cooked simple meals. I wasn't good at first. I burned the eggs and put too much salt on everything. But Uncle Tommy ate my cooking without complaining. He said, "Practice makes perfect." And he was right. Within a few months, I could make a pretty good meatloaf. He made me breakfast before school, eggs and toast, every single morning. He drove me to school in his old truck. He came to my parent-teacher conferences. He helped me with my math homework even though he wasn't good at math. He sat beside me and struggled through the problems with me, and we laughed when we both got the answers wrong. He never asked me about my parents. He never said, "Why did they leave?" or "Do you miss them?" He just let me be. He let me feel whatever I needed to feel. Some nights I would sit on the porch and cry. Uncle Tommy would bring me a cup of tea and sit beside me. He wouldn't say anything. He would just sit. And that was enough. I started to heal, slowly, like a broken bone that takes time to mend. Uncle Tommy didn't try to fix me. He just created a space where I could fix myself. School got better. I had been a good student before, but after my parents left, my grades had dropped. I couldn't concentrate. I didn't see the point. But Uncle Tommy showed me the point. He showed me that education was my way out, my way to a life better than the one my parents had. I started studying again, really studying. I stayed after school for extra help. I joined the debate team. I wrote for the school newspaper. I kept myself busy because being busy meant I didn't have time to be sad. By junior year, my grades were back up. By senior year, I was in the top 10% of my class. Uncle Tommy came to every awards ceremony. He sat in the back with Gus in the truck, waiting to take me out for ice cream after. I remember one night in particular. It was the winter of my senior year. A huge snowstorm hit. The power went out. Uncle Tommy and I sat by the fireplace with Gus between us. We couldn't see anything outside. The wind was howling. But inside, it was warm. Uncle Tommy made popcorn on the stove. We told stories. He told me about the time he tried to fix a customer's car and accidentally set it on fire. I told him about the time I accidentally called my teacher Mom. We laughed until our stomachs hurt. And in that moment, sitting by the fire with my uncle and his dog, I realized something. I was happy, truly happy. Not pretend happy, not I'll be fine happy. Real, deep, peaceful happy. I hadn't felt that way since I was a little girl. Maybe I had never felt it at all. I finished high school. Uncle Tommy came to my graduation. He wore his only suit. It was too big for him. He stood in the back and clapped louder than anyone. When I walked across the stage, I looked for him in the crowd. He was wiping his eyes. I had never seen him cry before. After the ceremony, he hugged me. He said, "I'm proud of you, Riley. Your parents are fools for leaving you, but I'm glad they did, because I got to be your family." I cried again. But this time, they were happy tears. I went to community college. Uncle Tommy helped me pay for it, not with big checks. He didn't have big checks. He helped by letting me live rent-free, by buying my textbooks, by driving me to night classes when my car broke down. He gave what he could, and he gave it with love. I studied business, marketing, finance. I worked part-time at a grocery store. I saved every penny. Uncle Tommy never asked for anything in return. He just said, "Do something good with your life. That's all I want." Community college was different from high school. The students were older. Some had kids. Some had full-time jobs. Nobody cared about popularity or cliques. Everyone was just trying to get ahead. I fit in there. I wasn't the abandoned girl anymore. I was just Riley, the hardworking student who always sat in the front row. I made a few friends. A girl named Jenna who wanted to be a nurse. A guy named Marcus who was studying accounting. We would study together at the library. We would complain about exams. We would get coffee at the campus cafe. Normal things, things I had never really had before. Uncle Tommy was proud of me. He put my report cards on the refrigerator. He kept a photo of me in his wallet. He told his customers at the garage about his niece who was going to college. He was my biggest fan. When I was 20, I transferred to a 4-year university. Uncle Tommy drove me to campus. He helped me carry my bags to my dorm room. He looked around at the building and the students and the green lawns. He said, "You belong here, Riley. Don't let anyone tell you different." Then he drove home. And I stood in my dorm room, alone for the first time since I was 15, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. University was harder than community college. The classes were tougher. The expectations were higher. But I was ready. I had been through worse than a difficult exam. I had survived being abandoned. I could survive anything. I threw myself into my studies. I took classes in marketing, consumer behavior, branding, and digital media. I got internships. I networked. I built a portfolio. I worked every summer and every break. I didn't go on spring break. I didn't party. I worked. And every Sunday, I called Uncle Tommy. We would talk for an hour about nothing. About Gus the dog, about his tomatoes, about my classes. Those calls kept me grounded. They reminded me that no matter how far I went, I had a home. One Sunday, Uncle Tommy told me that Gus had died. He had been old. 16 years. Uncle Tommy had had him since Gus was a puppy. I could hear the pain in his voice. He tried to be brave. He said he went in his sleep. Peaceful. But I knew Uncle Tommy was heartbroken. I drove home that weekend. 5 hours. I didn't tell him I was coming. I just showed up at his door with a pizza and a 6-pack of soda. When he opened the door, his eyes were red. He had been crying. He tried to smile. He said, "Riley, what are you doing here?" I said, "I came to see you. I heard you needed company." He hugged me. He held on longer than usual. We sat on the porch and ate pizza and talked about Gus, about all the good times. About the time Gus chased a squirrel into a pond. About the time Gus ate an entire birthday cake off the counter. We laughed. We cried. And by the end of the weekend, Uncle Tommy was okay. Not fine, but okay. I learned something that weekend. Love isn't just about being there for the good times. It's about showing up when it hurts. Uncle Tommy had shown up for me when I was broken. Now it was my turn to show up for him. After college, I got a job at a small marketing firm. I started at the bottom, answering phones, making coffee, but I worked my way up. I was good at my job, better than good. I had something to prove, not to my parents. They didn't matter anymore. I had something to prove to Uncle Tommy. I wanted him to see that his faith in me wasn't wasted. My boss at the marketing firm was a woman named Diane. She was tough but fair. She saw something in me. She gave me chances. She let me work on small accounts, then medium accounts, then big accounts. I learned everything I could from her. I stayed late. I came in early. I read every book on marketing I could find. Within 2 years, I was a project manager. Within 3 years, I was a senior manager. I was making good money. I sent some to Uncle Tommy every month. He tried to send it back. I told him, "You spent 18 years taking care of me. Let me take care of you now." He finally stopped arguing. By the time I was 25, I started my own company, a marketing firm, just me and a laptop. I worked 16-hour days. I didn't date. I didn't take vacations. I built my business from nothing. Just like Uncle Tommy built a home for me from nothing. The first year was brutal. I lost money. I had clients who didn't pay. I had employees who quit. There were nights I sat in my empty office and wondered if I had made a huge mistake. But then I would think about Uncle Tommy, about how he never gave up on me, about how he worked 12-hour days at the garage and still came home with a smile. If he could do that, I could do this. I kept going. I found better clients. I hired better people. I learned from my mistakes. Slowly, the business started to grow. 1 client became 5, 5 became 20, 20 became 50. Within 3 years, my company had 50 employees. Within 5 years, we were one of the fastest growing firms in the state. I was 30 years old. I owned a penthouse apartment. I drove a nice car. I had money in the bank, and I had Uncle Tommy. I bought him a new truck for his 60th birthday. He cried. He said, "Riley, this is too much." I said, "Uncle Tommy, you gave me a home when I had nothing. This is nothing compared to that." He drove that truck every day until the day he died. But that comes later. When I was 28, I started thinking about my parents again. Not because I missed them, because I was curious. I had spent so many years angry at them, then so many years ignoring them. Now I was successful. I was happy. And I wondered what had happened to the people who threw me away. I hired an investigator. I wanted to know where they were, what they were doing, whether they ever thought about me. The report came back and it stopped my heart. My parents had moved 7 times in 13 years. They had declared bankruptcy twice. My dad had been sued for fraud. My mom had been arrested for shoplifting. They were living in a rundown mobile home in a desert town called Dust Creek, Arizona. They had no jobs, no savings, no friends. They were alone, broke, and desperate. And they had another child, a daughter, born 3 years after they left me. Her name was Sophie. She was 10 years old. And according to the report, my parents were about to lose her. Social services had been involved with the family for years. My parents had been cited for neglect, for unsanitary living conditions, for failing to provide proper food and medical care. Sophie was malnourished. She had missed over 60 days of school. A court hearing was scheduled for next month. If my parents lost custody, Sophie would go into foster care. I stared at that report for an hour. Sophie, my sister. A little girl I didn't know existed. A little girl who was living the same nightmare I had lived. Maybe worse. I called Uncle Tommy. I told him everything. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "Yes, you do. You're going to save her. Because that's who you are. You're not your parents. You never were." He was right. I knew what I had to do. But I was scared. What if Sophie didn't want to come with me? What if she was angry at me for abandoning her? What if she was just like our parents? These thoughts kept me up at night. I would lie in my bed and stare at the ceiling and wonder if I was making a terrible mistake. Uncle Tommy must have sensed my fear. He called me one night and said, "Riley, do you remember when I came to get you from your aunt's house? You were scared too. You didn't know me. You hadn't seen me in years. But you got in my truck anyway, because somewhere inside you, you knew that anything was better than where you were. Sophie will feel the same way. She just needs someone to show her that there's something better." I took a deep breath. I said, "You're right. I flew to Arizona, I rented a car and drove to Dust Creek. The town was exactly what it sounded like. Dust, heat, broken signs, dead businesses. The mobile home park was at the edge of town, surrounded by scrubland and trash. My parents' trailer was beige with rust streaks. The steps were broken. There was a faded plastic slide in the yard, half buried in dirt. I parked across the street and watched. After an hour, I saw her. A little girl with dirty blonde hair and skinny arms. She was wearing shorts that were too big and a t-shirt with a cartoon character on it. She was sitting on the broken steps, drawing in the dirt with a stick. She looked so small, so alone. She looked like me at 15, only younger, much younger. My heart broke, not with revenge, not with anger, with love, with the sudden, overwhelming need to protect her. I got out of the car, I walked across the street, I climbed the broken steps. The screen door had a hole in it, I could see inside. The trailer was filthy, dishes in the sink, trash on the floor. The air smelled like cigarettes and old food. Sophie looked up at me. She didn't look scared. She looked curious. She said, "Who are you?" I knelt down so I was at her level. I said, "My name is Riley. I'm your sister." Her eyes got big. She said, "I don't have a sister." I said, "Yes, you do, me, and I'm here to take you home." Just then, the trailer door opened. My mom stood there. Carol. She looked old. Older than her years. Her face was lined. Her hair was gray and thin. She was wearing a stained bathrobe. She looked at me with blank eyes for a long moment, then her face changed. Her mouth opened. Her hand went to her throat. She whispered, "Riley." I said, "Hello, Mom. It's been a long time." She started crying, ugly crying, sobbing. She fell against the doorframe and said my name over and over, "Riley, Riley, Riley." Like she was trying to remember how to say it. My dad came to the door behind her. Derek. He had gained weight, lost hair, his eyes were yellow, his hands shook. He looked at me and I saw fear, pure fear. I said, "I'm not here for you, I'm here for Sophie." My mom said, "You can't take her. She's ours." I said, "Not for long. The court is going to take her, and when they do, I'll be there, I'll adopt her. I'll give her the life you never gave me, the life you never gave her." My dad said, "You can't do that." I said, "Watch me." My mom grabbed my arm, her fingers were bony and cold. She said, "Riley, please, we made mistakes, but we're still your parents. You can't just come here and take our baby." I looked at her hand on my arm. I looked at her face. I thought about all the nights I cried myself to sleep on my aunt's couch. I thought about all the birthdays they missed, all the school plays, all the parent-teacher conferences, all the moments a daughter needs her mother and father. I said, "You stopped being my parents the night you drove away. You stopped being Sophie's parents the day you let her go hungry. You don't get to call her your baby. You lost that right." I pulled my arm away. I took Sophie's hand. She was watching everything with wide eyes. She didn't understand. She was only 10. I said, "Sophie, I'm going to come back for you, I promise. And when I do, you're going to come with me to a better place. Okay?" Sophie looked at my mom. My mom was crying. Sophie looked back at me. She said, "Okay." I left. I walked back to my car with tears streaming down my face. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I called social services the next day. I told them I was Sophie's sister. I told them I wanted to take custody. I gave them my name, my address, my financial records. I showed them that I could give Sophie a safe home. The social worker was a woman named Patricia. She had been doing this job for 20 years. She had seen everything. She listened to my story. She didn't cry. She didn't gasp. She just nodded and said, "I'll look into it." The next week, Patricia went to Dust Creek. She saw the trailer. She saw my parents. She saw Sophie. She made her report. The court moved fast. My parents fought it at first. They screamed at the social worker. They screamed at the judge. They said I was lying. They said I was trying to steal their daughter, but everyone could see the truth. The trailer was a mess. Sophie was sick and skinny. My parents were drunk half the time. The judge gave me temporary custody. I flew back to Arizona. I went to the trailer one more time. This time, I brought a suitcase for Sophie. I packed her things. There wasn't much. A few clothes. A stuffed rabbit with one ear missing. A coloring book. That was it. My parents watched from the corner of the trailer. My mom was crying. My dad was staring at the floor. Neither of them said goodbye to Sophie. Neither of them hugged her. They just let her walk out the door with me. I took Sophie to a hotel. I gave her a bath. I washed her hair 3 times to get the dirt out. I ordered pizza. She ate 4 slices. She fell asleep watching cartoons. I sat beside her and watched her breathe. She was so small, so fragile, so full of hope. The next day, we flew home. I took Sophie to my penthouse, to the room I had prepared for her. Pink walls, a bed with a canopy, stuffed animals, a kitten named Machi. She looked around with wide eyes and said, "Is this all for me?" I said, "Yes, all for you." She threw her arms around my neck and hugged me. She said, "Thank you, Riley, I love you." I started to cry. I held her and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Complete, whole, like all the broken pieces of my life had finally been put back together. The first few months with Sophie were hard. She had nightmares. She would wake up screaming. She was afraid of the dark. She hoarded food in her room because she was used to not having enough. She flinched when I raised my hand too fast, even though I would never hit her. I called Uncle Tommy. I told him I didn't know what I was doing. I told him I was scared I was going to mess Sophie up. He said, "Riley, you're not going to mess her up. You know why? Because you know what it feels like to be hurt. You know what she needs because you needed the same things. Just be there. That's all, just be there." I took his advice. I was there. Every morning, every night, every nightmare, every tear, I was there. I drove Sophie to meet Uncle Tommy. He was older now. His hair was gray, his hands shook a little, but his eyes were still kind. He knelt down and said, "So you're Sophie? I've heard so much about you." Sophie said, "Your Uncle Tommy. Riley told me you saved her." Uncle Tommy smiled. He said she saved herself. I just gave her a place to do it. Sophie hugged him, and Uncle Tommy hugged her back. And for a moment, standing in his garden full of tomatoes, surrounded by sunflowers and Gus the dog's grave and the smell of coffee, I felt like the luckiest person in the world. I raised Sophie with love, real love, the kind my parents never gave me, the kind Uncle Tommy taught me. I took her to school, I made her breakfast, I read her bedtime stories, I taught her to ride a bike. I held her when she cried. I celebrated when she laughed. She grew, her cheeks filled out. Her eyes got bright, she made friends, she got good grades, she became happy, and her happiness became my happiness. I also made sure she knew about Uncle Tommy. I told her stories about how he saved me, about how he worked at the garage, about his tomatoes and his sunflowers, about Gus the dog, about the night he came to get me from my aunt's house. Sophie loved those stories. She would ask for them again and again. "Tell me about the truck, Riley. Tell me about the eggs and toast. Tell me about the fire in the garage," and I would tell her, every time. Uncle Tommy came for dinner every Sunday. He would sit at our table and tell stories about when I was a teenager, embarrassing stories. Sophie loved them. She would laugh and say, "Tell me another one, Uncle Tommy," and he would. Those were the best years of my life. When Sophie was 15, the same age I was when my parents abandoned me, Uncle Tommy got sick. Cancer. It came fast. 1 month he was fine. The next month he was in the hospital. I sat beside his bed every day. Sophie sat beside me. Uncle Tommy looked at me with his kind eyes. He said, "Riley, you did good. You did real good." I said, "I learned from you." He said, "Take care of that girl. She's got a big future." I said, "I will, I promise." He looked at Sophie. He said, "You're lucky to have her, you know, she's the best of all of us." Sophie was crying. She said, "I love you, Uncle Tommy." He said, "I love you too, kid." He squeezed my hand, then he closed his eyes, and he was gone. I didn't cry at first. I held Sophie and I stayed strong for her. But that night, after she went asleep, I sat on my balcony and I cried. I cried for Uncle Tommy. I cried for the 15-year-old girl he saved. I cried for all the years we had together and all the years we wouldn't have. And then I felt something, a hand on my shoulder. Sophie. She was standing behind me, wrapped in a blanket. She said, "Don't cry, Riley. Uncle Tommy wouldn't want you to cry." I pulled her onto my lap. She was 15, too old for laps, but she let me hold her anyway. I said, "You're right, he wouldn't." We sat there together, 2 sisters, 2 orphans, 2 survivors. And we looked up at the stars. A year after Uncle Tommy died, my parents came back. I don't know how they found me. Maybe they saw my name in a business magazine. Maybe they heard through someone. But one day, I came home from work and they were sitting on the steps of my building. My mom was thinner. My dad looked sick. They were both crying. A small crowd of people were watching. Security guards were trying to move them along. My mom saw me and screamed my name. Riley, Riley, please, we're so sorry, please let us see her, please let us see Sophie, please let us come home. I stopped. I looked at them. Two broken people begging on the steps of my building. 13 years ago, they had driven away and left me on a porch. Now they were the ones on the outside looking in. Now they were the ones begging. My mom crawled toward me on her knees. She grabbed my ankles. She said, "Please, Riley, we're your parents, we love you, we made mistakes, but we love you. Please, we have nowhere else to go." I looked down at her. This woman who gave birth to me. This woman who left me on a couch with a $20 bill. This woman who let another daughter live in filth and hunger. I felt something then, not anger, not satisfaction, not revenge. I felt pity. Deep, sad pity, because they had nothing, no home, no family, no love. They had run away from everything good in their lives and now they had nothing left. But pity is not the same as forgiveness. I said, "You don't love me. You don't love Sophie, you love what we can give you, and I have nothing left to give." My mom sobbed. My dad put his hand on my shoulder. I shook it off. I said, "Uncle Tommy saved me when you threw me away. He gave me a home. He gave me love. He taught me what family means. And you know what I learned? Family isn't about blood. Family is about who shows up, who stays, who loves you even when it's hard. You never did that. Not for me, not for Sophie." My mom said, "We can change. We can be better." I said, "You had your chance. You had 13 years, you blew it." My dad spoke. His voice was weak. He said, "We're dying, Riley. Both of us. The doctors say we don't have long. We just want to see our daughters before we go." I looked at him, really looked. His yellow eyes, his shaking hands, the weight he had lost. He wasn't lying, he was sick. They both were. For a moment, I felt something crack inside me. The same crack I felt the night they left. The same crack that had never fully healed. Part of me wanted to let them in. Part of me wanted to give them one last chance. Part of me wanted to be a good daughter, even though they had never been good parents. But then I thought about Sophie. About the nightmares she still had sometimes. About the way she still hid food in her room. About the years of therapy she had needed to learn that she was worthy of love. My parents had done that to her. They had broken her, just like they had broken me. I said, "I'm sorry you're sick. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. But you don't get to come here at the end and ask for forgiveness. You don't get to use your dying as a guilt trip. You made your choices. Now you have to live with them or die with them." My mom screamed. A terrible animal sound. She grabbed my legs and held on. She said, "Please, Riley, please, we're begging you." I looked down at her. I remembered being 15 years old, standing on a porch, watching her taillights disappear. I remembered begging her to stay. She hadn't stayed. She had driven away. I said no. I pulled away from her. I walked into my building. I didn't look back, but I heard them. I heard my mom screaming my name. I heard my dad crying. I heard the security guards telling them to leave, and I kept walking. I went upstairs. Sophie was in the living room doing homework. She looked up and saw my face. She said, "What happened?" I sat down next to her. I said, "Your birth parents are downstairs. They want to see you." Sophie's face went pale. She said, "I don't want to see them." I said, "You don't have to. I told them to leave." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Do you ever miss them?" I thought about it. I thought about the night they left, about the $20 bill, about the taillights disappearing, about the years of anger and sadness and emptiness, about Uncle Tommy, about his eggs and toast, about his truck, about his garden full of tomatoes. I said, "I used to miss the idea of them. The parents I wished they were, but I never missed who they really were." Sophie nodded. She said, "That's how I feel too." I put my arm around her. I said, "We don't need them. We have each other. And we have Uncle Tommy. Even though he's gone, we have everything he taught us." Sophie leaned her head on my shoulder. She said, "I love you, Riley." I said, "I love you too, Sophie." We sat there for a long time, just the two of us. Two sisters, two survivors. My parents left eventually. The security guards made them go. I don't know where they went. I don't care. They are ghosts now. And I am done chasing ghosts. I found out later that they both died within 6 months. My mom first, then my dad. They died alone, in a cheap motel room with no one to hold their hands. Part of me was sad when I heard the news. Part of me was relieved. And part of me felt nothing at all. I didn't go to the funeral. Neither did Sophie. There was no funeral, no one to plan it, no one to attend. They died the way they lived. Alone, my name is Riley. I am 35 years old. I have a sister named Sophie. I have a cat named Oscar and a kitten named Machi. I have a company and a penthouse and more money than I will ever need. But none of that matters. What matters is that I learned the hardest lesson there is. The best revenge is not cruelty. It is not watching your enemies suffer. The best revenge is living well, is breaking the cycle, is taking the pain you were given and turning it into love. My parents abandoned me at 15. My uncle took me home, he saved my life, and then I saved my sister. That is my story. It is not a story of hate. It is a story of hope. Sophie is 17 now. She is tall and smart and kind. She wants to be a doctor. She wants to help people. She still has nightmares sometimes, but they are fewer now. She still hides food in her room, but she is learning to trust that there will always be enough. She is healing, just like I healed. Every Sunday, we still have dinner at Uncle Tommy's table. We set a place for him, we talk about him, we remember his laugh and his kindness and his terrible cooking. He is gone, but he is not forgot. He lives in us, in every choice we make to be kind. In every moment we choose love over anger. If you are out there and you have been abandoned or hurt or forgotten, hear me. Find your Uncle Tommy or be someone else's Uncle Tommy, because the world needs more people who show up, who stay, who love even when it's hard. My parents are gone, but I am here. Sophie is here, and Uncle Tommy lives in both of us. Every time we choose love over anger. Every time we show up for each other. Every time we break the cycle instead of passing it on. That is my story, that is my revenge, and I would not trade it for anything.